Hi everyone, welcome to this adult sci-fi fantasy debut panel. This has seriously like one of my all of my all-time most anticipated releases here. I've enjoyed reading this so much. It's been so fun to read the books beforehand and kind of get into that headspace. So I'm so excited for that. Just a little bit about me, if you don't know who I am. My name is Lily. I'm the moderator for this panel, and I'm kind of like the person behind Utopia State of Mind on the internet. So next, I'm going to have my lovely panelists introduce themselves. We're going to go into some questions that I have, and then if you have any questions, please drop them in the chat, and I will remind myself to go back to them when we are answering questions. So, Yume, do you want to start?
Hi, I'm Yume, and my book is The Deep Sky, coming out July 18th. It's a feminist space thriller about an interstellar voyage that's knocked off course by a mysterious explosion, and they have to figure out who is trying to kill all of them. So.
Hi, I'm Jared Dawson, or Jen. I wrote The First Bright Thing, which it comes out in the US this Tuesday, the 13th, and in the UK on the 22nd of June. It's a magical queer circus who's trying to fix the world in small ways. And there's also kind of a scarier queer circus, or scarier magical circus that is coming after them.
I can just go right after that. Hi, everyone. I am Kritika H. Rao. I'm the author of The Surviving Sky. It's an epic science fantasy, and it really is a science fantasy. So it's based on Hindu philosophy. It's a story about this husband-wife duo who are trying to save their floating plant city from crashing into jungle storms as they're trying to save their marriage. And I love it. It's super weird. It's super nerdy, and I think the world of it.
Hello, my name's Hannah Kana, and I'm the author of Godkiller, which was released in the UK in January of this year, and it's going to be released in the US in September, along with a few other places. And Godkiller is about it's a fantasy adventure. It's about a woman who kills gods for a living until she finds a god that she cannot kill, which is attached to a little noble girl on the run. It's sort of quest story, queer non-world, and very angry, gritty feminist protagonist. So kind of like The Witcher meets American Gods. And I'll pass to Alice.
Hi, I'm Alice. I'm AY Chow. My book, Shanghai Immortal, oops, wrong way, this way, came out last week. 10 days ago. 10 days ago. Oh my God, it's been 10 days. On the 1st of June in the UK. And actually, I think it's global. I think it's only the hardcovers are not out in the US until the 31st of October. But like the Kindle and the ebook and the audiobook is available. And the story is set in 1930 Shanghai, and it's about a half Huijing, half vampire sasshole. I mean, I think that's the best way to describe her. She's got anger issues, and she basically, it's an extended metaphor for dual heritage and trying and sort of embracing all parts of yourself. But the story follows Lady Jing, who wants revenge against her elders who tormented her, and but then there's a mortal who comes to, she lives in hell, and there's a mortal who comes to hell to set up the first bank of hell. And she's tasked with babysitting this mortal so he doesn't get eaten by all the other demons and Yao Jing in hell. And then she kind of learns about friendship and thinking about somebody other than yourself. So that's the story. And yeah.
So since one of the themes of this panel is the debut experience, I want to start off by asking if you could all tell us about your journey to publication with this book and also the inspiration behind it. Yume, do you want to start?
Sure. So I should start by saying the Deep Sky is not the first book that I ever wrote. And I think this is important to say because when I was an aspiring author, I sort of had this conception that you write a book, you get an agent, and you sell it. And that can be kind of a demoralizing thing because then you feel like you're failing if that doesn't happen to you. So This is actually the 5th book that I wrote, if I count like the first book that I wrote when I was 13. And the previous book that I wrote got me an agent, and then didn't sell, which is also fairly common, by the way. And then during the pandemic, I wrote this one, and then it did sell, and I got a 2-book deal, so that was wonderful. And I would just say, you know, there's a lot that went into this. Part of it is the desire to write a science fiction book that sort of is very different from the kind of traditional science fiction books like, you know, Robert Heinlein that I grew up reading, where you've got a bunch of cis men running around on spaceships. It's basically the inverse of that. There are no cis men on the crew of the Phoenix, and so that is, you know, part of the fun. And I will also say that, you know, I wrote it during the pandemic, so there are, you know, a lot of probably the anger and the helplessness and the, you know, intense feelings that I was feeling during 2020 definitely sort of seeped into this. But it's not a sad book. I did do an edit that like removed people bursting into tears every single chapter, which was true in one of the previous versions. So it's not a sad book, but it definitely has a lot of feelings.
You want me to go? Okay. Sorry. Yeah, so this is actually kind of a hard question for me because it's one of those that like it wasn't like, ah, yes, the spark happened and like it was like all of these little moments that sort of spiraled into, oh, now I guess I'm gonna write this book now. And I agree with you, May, like this is not the first manuscript I wrote. Like, oh my gosh, like I had been querying for years. And I actually got my agent with a co-authored book. This was the second thing that I sent my agent. And the co-authored book went on submission and died on submission. Like, so I don't, gosh, I did a count of how many stories I'd written from like age 10 to like age 30 whatever, and it was a lot. And it was definitely not the first one I queried. It was probably the third, fourth, fifth one that I queried. So yeah, keep going. I think that I mean, I started writing it in 2018 and did most of the writing from 2018 to 2020, and then revisions. And I think that for me, I needed to see what I needed in the future. So I needed like a found family. I needed to see that, you know, what a middle-aged badass looked like. And I needed to see like queer joy and a lot of stuff that I was very concerned in 2018 I wasn't going to be able to get in my future. So it was a hopeful book and a healing book for me.
I can just go right after that. It's very like I gotta say, I feel like my experience is actually really widely different from a lot of like people I talk to often, because the Surviving Sky was not the very first book I wrote by any means. I actually wrote one other book or 2 books before that, which were Game of Thrones ripoffs, and then I decided that I need to grow up and you know embrace my weird, which I did. And then I wrote The Surviving Sky, and that is the book that I got my agent with. I actually had a couple of agents interested in the book, and then I picked my current agent, Naomi Davis from Bookends. And then about 3 days after we signed with each other, we went on sub, and a week after that, we went on auction. And then, I know it sounds like a really beautiful story, but then there's a twist. I signed on with a publisher, and for a variety of reasons, which you can like look online, I'm sure there's Twitter threads still live, I actually had to cancel my contract with the publisher. And that was really painful, and it was a hard decision, but there was no possible way that I could continue working with them because it was a very, very hard relationship. And I'm a queer woman of color living in North America. Like, we all know what publishing is like. It's like this was definitely not a decision I made lightly. It was not based out of things that unfortunately happened to a lot of people, but it reached a point where I was like, no. But then I did sell this book and this series to Titan Books, who are my current publishers. And it's coming out on June 13th. So it's been like a bit of a weird roller coaster kind of a ride to kind of get to this point. And I'm so excited. Like, I'm so happy this book is finally coming out. Like, I got to shout out the book community because they showed up big time when I went through that crisis, of canceling the contract and everything. Um, and I'm really excited that people are finding this book right now. The inspiration for the book itself, like you may kind of, it really started with Ahilya and Aravan were the two married protagonists of the book. They're in their mid 30s, etc. And I also wrote this book during the pandemic. So just like you may, there is a lot of feelings in the book. There is a lot of rage and anger between the two protagonists and the world itself. And but there's hope too, and there's love, but it's kind of conflicted and convoluted, and yeah, just a lot of big feelings. And I really wanted to lose myself in a different world when I was, as I think all of us were during the pandemic. So I created a world of my own, and that's basically the Surviving Sky. So yeah, that's my wild journey.
I was going to say Alice go first, but I got the mute button quicker, so boom. I'm so sorry I went through all that, Krithika, but also amazing resilience, and from all of you as well. And I think that's quite a definitive personality trait as a writer is resilience and grit. This is, yes, the God Killer was the 7th full-length book that I wrote, and the 4th one that went on sub. Yes, 4th one that went on sub with my agent. So all 3 before that had gone with my agent and had died on sub, which is such a sad thing to say, but each of them I learned something from. And I kind of kept pursuing writing because writing just still feels like breathing for me. Sometimes it's a bit hard, but it feels like such a natural expression of my creativity, I hope. And yeah, what the inspiration behind it is I kind of wanted to delve back into the sort of structures of storytelling and some traditional storytelling as well. So I really sort of dove into the sort of quest narrative. It's like the Odyssey or the Iliad or the Hobbit, and wanted to kind of play with that very, very traditional way of storytelling and tell it in a slightly different way, in a way that was more open and more welcoming and a little bit more varied as well. And so that's kind of where I got to with God Killer, and I'll pass to Alice.
Hi. Yeah, so let's see. I queried a book before this one. So this is my 3rd book. The book I queried before had gone through pitch wars, and yeah, looking back, it really wasn't ready. It wasn't there. And I knew that actually, I think within 2 months of querying, I was like, oh, yeah, this isn't, I don't know. I just had a feeling. So I was like, okay, yeah, leave that, do something else. And yeah, my book is another pandemic book. I wrote it during lockdown, I think July of 2020. And it was like, yeah, it was actually a reaction to some news that I got that was quite upsetting, but it was a case where I couldn't complain, I couldn't do anything, and I felt kind of trapped, like like political social stuff. You just, there's, out of courtesy and social norms, you don't say stuff about certain things. So I was like, okay. And Lady Jing was my catharsis, my escape, my ability to rant, because she rages as well. You can tell there's like anger. She's got anger issues, and there's this feeling of injustice that she carries with her. And I think that was something that really, that was a little seed that came out of my real life. And basically I wrote that, and I was really lucky. I got agented I was taking Faber Academy, a course from them during pandemic, and it kept me saying, oh my God, like having a group of people and just like having, our game was to write 5 to 8,000 words every month and submit it, and then we would crit it. And it was a great exercise in like actually reaching out, because otherwise, if I didn't have those people, I probably would have stayed in bed in my pajamas like the whole time. I actually had to get dressed and look semi presentable for the Zoom calls, so that was a lifesaver. And they do this anthology, so they send the anthology out to a whole bunch of agents, and my agent was one who contacted me through that anthology, and that was really cool, because I would not have careered him otherwise, because I was using Publishers Marketplace to research agents, and my agent is a UK agent. They don't post their deals on Publishers Marketplace. They use something called Bookseller, which I didn't know at the time. So I feel really fortunate that he reached out, and I got agented, and then we went on sub, and the book sold at auction, which was just a dream. It was really nice. It was nice to be able to like after 10 years of kind of slogging and working and the whole up and down and being in the trenches and whatnot. Yeah, having that was a really, really nice, a really nice experience. And meeting the editors was great too. So that was lovely. And then I chose Hotterscape. And they're like an all-female team. Well, no, they're not all women, but it's majority women, which was like really cool to me because I hadn't really seen that before, especially in a science fiction, like a specifically SFF imprint. So that was really cool. And yeah, when it came out, it did really well so far. I mean, it's had a nice splash. Yeah, so we'll see how. Yeah, it hit #1 on the Sunday Times bestseller list. It's coming out tomorrow in the paper. So I'm really like, it's very, very exciting. And it isn't something that I ever really imagined. I wasn't expecting it. So it's been a really nice, everything's been a gift. I've been really pleased. So
Congratulations.
Okay, so my next question is purely just because I was making graphics for this panel. And I was just in love with every single graphic I made because of all the gorgeous covers that all of your books have. And I wanted to know if you could talk us through what maybe might be your favorite element of your cover, and also if there are any hidden like Easter eggs or hidden references in them. Jen, do you want to start?
There's like so much. So Katie Klim did this cover, and there's like, I love how shiny it is. It's my favorite. But I kind of love how the tent is in the hourglass, and that has a thing. And I also just like, once you've read the book, I get really excited about this cover. Sorry. So once you've read the book, like, you know what these little lines are, and you know what these little stars are, and like, I just, and the first time I saw it, I was just like, oh my god, that's the book. That's like the minimalist way of saying what the story's about. And my favorite thing, I think, is on the back of the book, where they turned the little UPC code into a circus ticket for admit 1. And I just thought that was so cool. Like, one thing I've really loved about the marketing is how like the book is being treated as a performance in itself. Like, the circus is gonna go on tour and the circus is coming to town, and come see the circus and that kind of a thing, which is something that I really wanted to have happen, and it did. So yeah.
I love the color too of your cover.
Me too. So
Yeah, it's a really beautiful cover.
So shall I jump in, or are we doing? Yeah, I'll jump in. So Shanghai Immortal, I really, yeah, this was I was really pleased with it. I was really scared it was going to be ugly. And I was also really scared that it was going to be ugly and I wouldn't be able to say anything or do anything about it. And Hotterscape was really great. They like took in all my, like, crazy. I'm sorry. I had so many comments. Like, yeah, it was really annoying. And, but they were lovely about it. So I really love, my favorite bit is this Shanghai, the Bund here, upside down in because the story has 2 Shanghais. It has a mortal one and an immortal one where hell is. And so the upside down one is hell. And I think it's really cool. And there's like Lady Jing and her little sampan. And there's a dragon pearl hidden in there, which I really thought was cool. So yeah, and I love all the like the clouds and stuff. I really wanted those Chinese kind of curlicue clouds. I thought they were really pretty. So yeah, I'm really, really, really pleased with it.
I can go next. Those colors in your book, Alice, they're so gorgeous. Like, I love those colors. The Survivor Sky also has similar colors, which you can't tell because I have a lot of light right here. But I don't know, maybe you can tell right in the back there. But yeah, the Surviving Sky, the cover of it is so absolutely gorgeous. It actually shows this like floating plant city over jungle storms, and it feels very contained yet super expansive, which is exactly how the Surviving Sky is. It's told from the perspective of this just 2 POVs from this married couple, but it's also super epic. Like, they even though it is just from their perspective, you see so many details of the world, and the world building is very intense. Like when I said I was trying to escape into a different world, I wasn't kidding. So I really did. And and the detailing, good God, like the detailing is incredible. The artist is Leo Nichols. He's also doing the rest of the Rages trilogy, which is fantastic. Um, and honestly, when I got the cover, and my agent and I work closely with the artist on this. But when I got the final cover, I remember taking, like, magnifying it on my screen and going through it like inch by inch, like very closely, super zoomed in. And the details are incredible. Like you would take, if you took like a magnifying glass to the book into the cover, like you would see so many things pop. Like you would see the protagonist kind of hidden there. You would see like vines and like structures behind the bridges, etc. You would see like architecture which looks slightly different, which is a commentary on class and power, and like, even the jungle storms, you would see Easter eggs, etc. So are there any Easter eggs? Like, it's chock full of Easter eggs. Like that has to be my response. And I think people, when you kind of read the book and you go back and look at the cover, and I really hope they do, like really look at the cover, you will see so many like plot pieces just kind of fit together like a puzzle. It's the perfect cover. I really got lucky with that. So yeah, I mean, I could talk about the cover for the rest of the panel, but I imagine others have things to say too. So
So I also have Easter eggs. I think the two main ones I would just say is the birds are obviously a very important part of the story, which you will see when you read it, if you read it. But the other thing that I think is cool is, and this is something that I work with them on, is this sort of line here is, if you know your Japanese printing, it's a hokusai. And the famous hokusai is that great wave painting, which I think is actually used for the cover of Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow. This is the one that is, I think, called like the feminine wave. So it's a really beautiful print if you Google it. So that's my favorite Easter egg.
Y'all have had very different experiences of cover than I have. I mean, not in a bad way. I think the cover of Godkiller is one of the most beautiful things I've ever had the privilege to see. And the artist, Tom, is truly a gem and is now I'd count as one of my friends. But essentially my editor said, what do you think about this artist for the cover? And I said, yes, 100,000% yes, absolutely, please, please, please. And then that's the last thing I heard. And then my editor comes back and is like, kind of, yeah, we're thinking of putting a stag on the cover. And I was like, there's not really any stags in the book. So that'd be a bit weird. Like, I think there was like one like gentle reference to like kind of something symbolic about a stag in it. And she was like, are you sure? And I was like, yeah, pretty sure. I wrote it. And this is kind of like, as I was in the process of editing, I started to think about that symbology and think about kind of like where the stag could fit into the story and the kind of elements I'd hinted at but just hadn't brought to the fore. And so I kind of brought those elements to the forefront. And so you'll read it and you'll kind of see that symbology and see where it's threaded through and what it means. And I think that's actually been a really great rooting factor for the book as well. I do have a little bit of a Easter egg in the, let's go for, no, I'm going to really struggle to get this off and throw some things off as well. So the inner pages of the hardback cover in the UK, now that's fully Easter egg, and I actually ended up in like a really long conversation with the artist about that, about like kind of the description of this town that the characters visit and sort of what's going on in and around it. So that one's probably more Easter eggy. The other one's kind of like the anti-Easter egg. I took the egg and I hid it. But I mean, no shade. It was an absolutely beautiful cover, and it's, yeah, I feel so lucky to have it.
Hannah, that's so interesting that you after you saw the cover, that you kind of brought those things to the fore, because like we often think of the cover kind of being influenced by text, but this is such a good example of the text being influenced by the cover. Melissa Caruso has also spoken about this, how for one of her covers, the cover was so gorgeous that she kind of put a few pieces from the cover into the text. And it's such a conversation, right? Like between the cover and the text, especially if you kind of get lucky and you have such a brilliant cover. So yeah, That's really incredible.
I actually did that as well. Like I saw the cover, and I think I had the cover before we finished edits, so I sort of added a tiny little reference to it at the end, the very end, because it was so pretty.
That's awesome.
I was going to say I don't know if this is true for Jen, but the timing, at least with my publisher, like the cover, I think came after we had finalized edits. I wonder if that's a difference in regional difference in terms of like
Maybe.
order.
Yeah, I turned my final manuscript in like in March of 2022, and then I got the cover in like September, I think. Like they worked through it that summer, and then I was at Worldcon when it came in on the email, and I was like, oh my gosh, the cover. But yeah, we had ABMs out by the time that my cover came, so I was just kind of like, yay, you did great. It's wonderful. But that would have been so cool to like be able to play with it and like have two pieces of art chit chatting, and everybody's cover is just so pretty. I've been just staring at Kritika's cover like for months now, just like, oh, what is this? Oh my gosh. Okay.
It's so cool. I know. I totally love that there. There's been a few, topsy-turvy things happening in my journey, but the cover, I feel like a lot of it just gets made up because of the cover. So it's cool.
It gives me all the like Studio Ghibli vibes. You know, the cloud was it the City in the Cloud one? I thought that was really cool. But I think the reason I had my cover so early is because I signed in August last year, and we had like June as the release date. So everything was really like, I think I had my cover concepts in September, October, like really, really early, because I think they just wanted to get it all ready so that the arcs they would be ready for the arcs when the arcs are ready, because everything was being crushed. And I did all my edits like signed in August. I got my edits in September, and then basically September to December was like doing all of those, like the developmental, and then the copy edits, and then the proofreading and all that. Yeah, we were proofreading over Christmas. Fun.
Yes.
Yeah, I think that's so fascinating. I was doing a panel earlier this week, and I asked about titles, and it was a similar thing where someone actually had gotten the title, edits to the title, but had gotten it before edits were fully done, and was like, okay, now I need to go in and add references to make the title make a little bit more sense. If we have time later, I want to ask about titles too. It's one of my favorite things to ask about as well. We got a question that I really love, and also please, keep asking questions in the comments. But I really loved it. It says, sounds like these are all big feeling books. Was there something in the stories that was really difficult to write or that you struggled to get across? Kritika, do you want to start?
Sure. I think the hardest part really was to really nail down how abstract the philosophy is, and to nail it down into like visual metaphors while still keeping the pacing up and keeping the action up and keeping like the personal, states for the protagonist, because it is at the end of it a Hidea and a Ravan story. But there's a lot of abstract, weird shit that happens, especially from Ravan's perspective. Like he is this architect who is who is manipulating plants consciousness in order to create architecture. So it is like, right there, you're like, what? what the hell? And it doesn't just happen. It's not just like woo-woo magic, wave your arms around and plants kind of construct out of nowhere. He does it psychically. So he enters this extra dimensional reality called a moment, where he's able to see consciousness of different plants, and then he connects them, literally building, between that, which then represents itself in plants on the outside actually changing. So this is all a bit weird and abstract. So it was really kind of hard to nail down, putting it in such a way where it was understandable, and it was clear and exciting and interesting and visually captivating. So for me, I think that was the hardest part. The book also has so much to do with Hindu philosophy, which in many ways is really hard to distill and is very abstract in and of itself, but you kind of put it into that story form. It took a little bit of work, yeah.
For me, it was, I think Lady Jing, it's a very voicey book. So my book is kind of in your face voicey. And balancing Lady Jing so that because Smurfy can get very tiring, and giving Lady Jing some interiority so that she isn't just angry, like an angry that readers can't understand. I mean, I think I think it's a hard balance there. And I'm not absolutely certain I nailed it, because it seems that she is quite a Marmite character. Like, people either love her or completely are repulsed by her. So, yeah, it is what it is. But it wasn't super easy to balance that, because what I felt was okay. My editor would be like, maybe she shouldn't say this here so much, so many times. And I'm like, oh, okay, dial it back, dial it back. So that was tough.
I think one of the most difficult aspects of Godkiller to write was you've got like 3/4 quite traumatized characters in their own way who are just trying to kind of do their best. And it's set in the aftermath of a war between the gods that these two characters were deeply involved with. And like trying to figure out how to highlight the difficulty of that life after the war, of the actual terrible things people have to deal with, while still having them be funny and compelling and driven, was really difficult to do. And I think it's all about research and trying to find the right balance between like voice and experience, and apparently editing out most of my flashbacks, which was definitely the right way to go. But I think that was it. Is like kind of, it is a quite simple narrative, but most of the story is about where these characters go emotionally. And yeah, I found that the most like kind of difficult, big feeling aspect of the book to write, to kind of like bring that out, an element of fantasy that isn't always there.
Yeah, so my book, it's about a fun circus, but it's also about PTSD. And so I think that my book has dual narrators. One of them was really easy to write because it was super cathartic and like, sort of empowering to like get into this like world of Edward and be like, okay, this is, not the greatest person. And so I actually wrote most of Ed's stuff within like 40 minutes on like a rainy night in 2018. And then Rin took it out of me. Like, I was just like, come on, girl. So Rin has a lot of shields up, and she masks a lot. And so like during the edits, a lot of the edits that I would get back, the comments would be like, okay, but what about the interiority of Rin and like what's going on? And so finally I just wrote this scene where I was like, you know what, I'm not gonna worry about the cringe factor of what was going on inside of Rin. Like, even if I'm like, oh my God, this is so emo. Oh my God. Like, I'm just gonna let her be Rin. And then this scene came out of it where I was like, there it is. Okay. And I don't want to say which scene it is because like halfway through the book, I don't want to ruin anything. But like, I was like, yep, okay, there it goes. And then we were off to the races. But yeah, it's hard to be, what's the word I'm looking for? Be open and vulnerable while also like telling a story. It's kind of like just having like this like wild animal that like you're like, okay, be free, and also please don't buck me off. So doing your job as a professional writer and then also like trying to be human and go for those big feelings and walk through the fire, takes some out of you, and then you go play Animal Crossing.
I just want to say that feels like a commentary on publishing itself, like navigating all of that and, wild bees would also be free and, and yourself on it, like riding this machine. So thank you for that analogy.
I think I know which scene that was, and it was very good. I think for me, the hardest thing is the more, they always say, write what you know, right? which I guess is sort of code for, take a piece of yourself and sort of put it on a page. And I found, this is the first time that I tried to write a story that was really, I mean, a lot of my characters are often, mixed race or, diaspora. And this was the first time that I really tried to dig into like how that feels. And I found I could sing to my agent, like the more like this story just felt like, because of that, like a little bit more personal in a way. And sort of the more close to yourself the narrative gets, the harder it is, I find, to write, because it's like, you're sort of paralyzed by this like self-consciousness, and it's just, it's just really tricky to sort of force yourself through that, as sort of Jen was describing with that scene. I think the rawness of like what you're feeling, it's just really hard to sort of push past that and put it onto the page, because of the anxiety that you feel with sharing bits of yourself with the people that in your life who may or may not read it, and everybody else in the world.
My next question has to do with the world building, because I felt like all of your worlds, I mean, there's different varieties of like sort of removed from our own world, right, in everyone's world. But I loved how immersive and detailed they felt. It was like truly transporting. No, that's what I mean, but I don't know if that is actually the word that I mean. But like it transported me to other places, is what I mean to say. And I would love to know what your world building process was like, and if it changed throughout writing or like throughout the writing process. Kritika, do you want to start?
Sure. World building is a huge part of the Surviving Sky. I think, like most readers, whether they love the book or hate it or feel meh about it, like I think that's one thing I've consistently heard across the board, is that the world building is really, the star of the book in many ways, because I try to lose myself in that world and I try to create that for other people. Um, I don't know if I really had like a process where world building was different from the exploration of Ahilya and Aravin's own personalities, or from the plot of the world itself. Like it's all very, very keenly tied and knitted together. In some ways, the plot of Surviving Sky is a discovery of their world. It is like you don't really have an antagonist in the world. The antagonist is, these storms that are trying to kill you, and part of the plot mystery is, why the fuck is that happening? Sorry, am I allowed to say that? But why the hell is that happening? So and through the process of finding that out is how Ahilya and Aravin try to save their marriage as well. So there is a huge mystery component for it. So for me, writing the book really was very much exploring the world and finding the edges and spaces and corners of it through the plot. Like obviously, there's not everything that not everything about the world is in the book, but I think the world has a very lived-in feel, just like Ahilya and Aravin's marriage, because these people have been together for like 10, 11 years, but you're also just meeting them at the start of the book, right? For a reader, it's new, but for them, it's not. Just like their world is not. So it was really, I don't know if I can answer that very well without kind of divorcing. I don't think I can divorce the plot and the characters and the world really and say, oh, this was a world building element and I'm going to throw that in there. Like it was all just kind of a piece, really. It was all part of the same equation for me, which is why I think it works really well with the plot and the characters.
I love that way you kind of described it as like an active exploration, that you're kind of sort of the way that your characters are moving and the plot they are creating kind of exposes more and more of the world as you move through it. That was definitely kind of a strong element of my approach, is kind of trying to see the world from the perspective of the focus and the narrative, and to kind of build it around that story. So definitely kind of around the characters, and they kind of grew symbiotically through each other, through the kind of characterization and the quest and the story and the world kind of had to impact the characters back. So it became a kind of relationship between the characters and the world. And I just like kind of focused on that core concept of what if gods were real? What if they could be brought into reality, in a sort of, and taking that kind of classic fantasy setting and twisting it slightly differently. So I really loved exploring this world as I wrote, and I'm still kind of, with each like kind of book in the series, I'm exploring it a little bit further, and that's a real pleasure. I love researching it as well, so it's kind of like finding parts about our world and sort of choosing elements that I think belong there, and then sort of maybe disregarding elements that don't is really fun.
I think with science fiction, it's always sort of a constant thought experiment. Like, if you think about phones, for example, right? Right now we have smartphones. 20 years ago, we had landlines and, or cell phones. And 20 years before that, we had landlines. And 20 years from now, who knows what we'll have. And so, like, just sort of constantly sort of thinking back and forward, like, where do we think technology is going, and what will it potentially look like? But then beyond that, like, how does different technology sort of impact society and cultural norms, and how people interact with each other? And that second piece is the thing that I find so really fun and exhausting about writing science fiction, is sort of thinking through those things, and this idea of like what the world could be.
I just very quickly want to jump in and fangirl a little bit about that, you may, because oh my god, that sounds so like my jam. I haven't read your book yet, but I'm so excited for it. So obviously, I also does this like exploration of what technology can do, and what different sciences etc. can do, and how that can impact the world. So you saying that, like my heart just started racing. I'm like, I need to read this book like right now. So super excited for your book.
I think that my world building comes from like a bunch of different places. Like they're, for the most part, honestly, like what the characters feel and go through, and their found family and artistry and stuff like that. Like it's kind of what us queer artists in the Midwest go through every day. Like, but for the magical portion of it, like I always kind of thought of like this idea, this image of this little girl who could make images with her hands. And if everybody just sort of had like this one little piece of magic that sort of amplified who they were and their art. Because I have so many friends who have like a spark that's, it's not like, sparkle, sparkle, magic, but, I have a friend who can make the best cakes ever. And like, I have another friend who can look at like a piece of metal and then like put her little hat thing down and get a welder out and make these beautiful like winged women, and like just all of these gorgeous pieces of art that I see the people behind them and I'm like, oh my God, like that came out of you. And then also the idea of the sparks, comes from like an old Jewish thought of how every object, animal, person in the world has a little piece of the divine inside of them, and it's our job, our duty to go out and pull it out of each other and make the world kind of a brighter place. So I think that those were kind of my guiding lights, and then I guess a dash of audacity and putting in the time travel, and just kind of powering that open. But yeah, so a bunch of different places.
So for me, the world building, it's set in 35 Shanghai, and I did a lot of research for that, which was really fun. It was a really interesting place and in time. And I wrote it in pandemic, and this is when there was all the ESEA hate crimes happening, the AAPI hate crimes, and that particular era has a lot of mirrors. Like it mirrors this particular time, and there are a lot of echoes because, you know, Shanghai at that time was a treaty port. It was divided into foreign concessions. And, you know, having that particular place in time is a commentary on colonialism, and racism and capitalism. And so I wanted to have that as another layer to the story, because the story it's a fun little romp, and you can read it in, you know, and have a really good time. But there are elements of it that, you know, if you look at them, they're quite thought provoking, and I hope they make readers question things a little deeper and look at things. But, you know, and I mean, but from a craft perspective, like world building, like it generally, that's like one of my superpowers, my strong points. And one of the things that I like to do, and this is something I did in the Faber Academy course, is like when we did crits between our, like with my crit partners, we would play sensory bingo. So my world buildings tends to be very sensory driven. There's always like movement and smell and touch and feel. And we used to play sensory bingo. So if we read a crit piece and we had like touch, sight, smell, taste, and I can't remember what and sound. If you could get all five, you would get bingo. So we would like compete with each other to try to get bingo. I think that's something that has really seeped into generally how I write, because I'm always thinking, oh, how do I get bingo? How can I put, you know, more sensory experiences in my writing?
Okay, a question that someone in the chat has, but also is one of the questions that I had thought of, but it's, who is your favorite side character? Hannah, do you want to start?
I have so many, but I'm gonna have to say Kitten's found family. My main character has a family who have their own lives and have a home for her, and it's who she always goes back to. And they're called Yatho and Tene. One's an archivist and one is a blacksmith or a worksmith, because she's way better than a blacksmith. And they come out a lot more in book 2, because I just wanted to see more of them. I love them very much, and their relationship and their love of each other and kissing. So it's going to be them every time. Got some other good ones though.
I'll jump in. I think I've got it's a tie between two of them. There's Lady Gigi, who is Lady Jing's sort of best friend / frenemy, and she's this imperious, slightly spoiled, well, very spoiled actually, but very kind of, you know, confident in herself. She knows that she is a goddess, and oh boy, do you ever know it too. And the other one is Lord Black, who is a dragon king who basically is like one of the most powerful beings, if not the most powerful being in this entire world that I've created. But he likes to pretend that he's a poet. He likes to pretend he's an impoverished poet, and so runs around in these like shabby robes and just speaks in not quite riddles, but, you know, he just talks circular nonsense and never gives a straight answer. And he was so much fun to write, because he's just ridiculous, but so charming at the same time.
That reminds me of people I went to college with. I'm just kidding. Who are hopefully not watching. Just kidding.
I can go next. One of my favorite characters was Dhruv. He's Ahilya's best friend. She's one of the main characters, and he's a sungineer. So he's basically like an engineer in the world. So you have architects, and Ahilya is an archaeologist, and he is a sungineer, which is another one of those professions which is quite important. And I just love him. He's this like dude who is so impatient with everybody else's like incompetence, even if people around him are actually super competent. And I just feel like that's a very engineer thing to do. And he's super smart himself, but like he kind of walks into this room and he just expects everybody else is like not as smart as he is. And you know, there are people around him who are just as smart, or, you know, at least that's the way I've kind of written them. But he's also kind of in a place where he's had like a series of failures in his own inventions and things like that. So he's in this like very precarious phase in his own career. A lot of the Surviving Sky is about jobs, you know, and nerdy jobs, really. So that's one of his nerdy jobs as well. And he's really trying to save the world in his own way. he's so condescending. I just love that. He's so fun. He's so fun to write.
I love writing assholes.
Yeah. I feel like everyone in this
Marmite
is an
character.
asshole. Yeah.
Yeah, he sounds right up my alley. I'm like, oh yeah, I like this guy.
My favorite secondary, well, there's the one that I like, and then the one that I'm most grateful for that is in there, I guess. So my favorite is definitely Bernard. I needed him, and he came through. He's a good guy, and that's all I'll say about Bernard. And then the one that I'm glad is in there is Odette. I actually had almost cut her. I was getting really frustrated with where my interpretation of that character was going. And then one night when I was like, I'm going to cut Odette, my loving spouse came in and was like, you can't cut Odette. Odette is me. And I was like, oh. And so then like they're like, every time that you start writing Odette, just pretend that Odette is me. And I was like, okay, I can do that. And so like I started to really love Odette, clearly. And the reception that Odette has gotten as a character, like there was a trade review that was like, oh, it's true love and stuff. And I'm like, yes, and Odette really exists. Like there's a person that amazing in real life, and there is hope in the world. So I'm very grateful for Odette.
Sorry, I was struggling with the mute button. That's amazing because Odette is like such a wonderful, warm character, and so the fact that you're married to Odette is like it's pretty incredible. It's like not to brag or anything, but I'm married to Odette. I think for me the side character, sort of what I guess what everyone's saying, that's fun to write is sometimes the ones that are the most maybe more flawed or different from yourself. So I have a character named Ruth who's the former best friend, and I just like how much of a not people pleaser she is, because I am somebody who cares very much about people's opinion, which is frankly a terrible trait in a writer. And it makes everything way more painful. Ruth is just somebody who, like, she just goes through life and she's like, this is right, and this is what I believe, and to hell with everybody else. And I think that's a trait that I admire and struggle with.
I just realized that earlier I'd said that I wanted to ask about titles as if I didn't already have that plan, but then I was rereading the questions that I sent, and that is a question that is already there. So I, knew that I have this obsession with titles. That is the next question I want to ask, obviously. I want to know about your titles, if they were always, the same throughout drafting, if you had to change them, if you got them at the end and had to work them in, all of the good title stuff. Alice, do you want to start?
Sure. But my title has always been the same. For some reason, I put in Shanghai Immortal when I started writing it, and it has absolutely stayed the same. And luckily it works because it's about Shanghai and Lady Jing, who is an immortal, but also Shanghai Immortal is, they call hell, in my book, hell is called Immortal Shanghai, and they refer to the other Shanghai as the mortal Shanghai, or Yang Shanghai versus Yin Shanghai. So luckily my publisher also agreed, and they didn't ask to change it either. So it was very nice.
It's such a badass title, honestly. It just evokes all kinds of like images and feelings and just like vibes, really. It's a beautiful title.
Thank you.
Oh, I can go next since I was talking anyway, which I can't seem to stop. But anyway, the Soaring Sky was actually called Architects of Mind during drafting. And then around the same time, there was another SFF book that came out. I can't remember the author, but it was called Architects of Memory. And I was like, well, we can't have Architects of Mind then. That's going to be weird. So then I kind of hunted around for a title. and I workshopped this. And then kind of workshopped it with my betas and writing groups, etc. And that's how the Surviving Spy came to be. And that is how I queried it, and then it kind of stuck to for like whatever for the entire journey. And based off of that, I also kind of gathered similar titles for the rest of the trilogy as well, and those have also kind of stayed. I really like how it's kind of worked through the trilogy. I don't know if I'm allowed to share the other titles yet, but um, I mean, it's not particularly hard. If you Google it, you'll probably find it online somewhere because it's out there. But it kind of, with book one, you have Surviving Sky, and book two becomes a little bit bigger, and book three becomes like much bigger. So it's still, it kind of follows that fractalization, which is evident throughout the trilogy in many ways and throughout the book. So I'm a big fan.
So my title was A Journey. So the first title I came up with was something super long and convoluted, like The Dream Maker and the Fantastical Blob da da do do do. And then I decided to go the poetic route because I had just seen They Shall Not Grow Old, and had decided to scoot the story to in between the two world wars. And so I was looking through like old poetry from the guys who had been in the trenches, and I was like, everyone was a bird. And everybody was like, what? And I was like, okay. So then I scooted to my I loved this title. I love the title we have now, but I loved this title. It was What We Did with the Sparks. Because it like kind of just said out loud what the book was about, which that got axed. And then we had The Sparks for a while, and I was like, and so like my editor and I made like lists upon lists upon lists of titles, and we couldn't find one. And then at some point she sent back some edits for the first like 50, 60 pages. And like on the third page, she circled this description of Rin's smile when she's in the middle of the circus ring, and it's the first bright thing in this dark, dusty place. And she's like, first bright thing title? And I was like, yes! So we went with that, and it fit the aesthetic, and it worked. So it was a journey.
My title was originally much longer. It was The Narrow Road to the Deep Sky, which is based on there's a poet, a famous poet in Japan, Basho, who's like a haiku poet, and he wrote a travelogue called The Narrow Road to the Deep North, or the Deep Interior. So it was based on that. And then, when the book sold, my publisher said, you would get a lot more cover optionality if you shortened the title. And also, like, because it's, you're trying to go for like a little bit of a thriller aspect to it, shorter titles that are better. So what do you think of The Deep Sky? Which Chris like loses the Basho piece. But I thought about it for like 5 minutes, and I was like, these people know what they're doing. I do not. Sure, why not? And we chopped it off, and the cover was great. So, but that it was originally meant to be that, and we still have the excerpt from the Basho travelogue at the front of the book. Anyway, so.
Yeah, cover real estate is like a proper thing, isn't it? It's like how many word can we fit around how much space? And artists and designers are really creative with that. Godkiller was always Godkiller from the first draft to the final print. It kind of just does what it says on the tin. It's about a woman who kills gods. So it was the first of all of my books that went on sub with the same title as I started with, because I am terrible at titles. But apparently, it just hit the spot.
Well, thank you so much to everyone. Thank you for these questions. Thank you to the panelists for spending their time with us today. I've left the book links to the books down below, so definitely make sure to pre-order and also pick up all of your copies so that you can have an amazing TBR just like I did. And I hope everyone has a really great rest of your day. Until
Thank
we
you,
all see each other
Lily.
again.
Thank you
Thank
so
you,
much.
Lily.
Yeah,
Thanks
thanks for
for bringing
having
us
us.
together.
Thank you.